All right, so let's talk more about this NBA China drama. Because I talked a little bit about it on a previous stream I did. And I didn't say much about it because I feel like since everyone's talking about it, like I'm not adding much new to the discussion
What is the logical course of action?
on yeah, I feel like everything that I would have to say about it has already been said. Oh, I should have done more there. Oh well.
Bring it on.
But then more stuff has come out since. Steve Kerr. Steve Kerr. Someone asked Steve Kerr about it. What are his thoughts on the whole NBA China situation? He sort of dodged it and evaded, saying, "Oh well, no one, everyone's asking me about this, but no one in China is asking me about the mass shootings we have in the United States and all the injustices that we have in the United States." Essentially implying, why do I have to have a strong opinion on this China stuff? When the United States isn't perfect. Kind of reminds me of when Trump was interviewed by Bill O'Reilly. I think it was soon after he won the election, and they were talking about Putin. And Bill O'Reilly said, yeah, you could look up to Putin, but, this guy's a killer. He's been accused of attacking... I think he just said that, he just straight up said he's a killer. I don't think he got into the specifics. And Trump dodged it, saying, oh, well, the United States has killed people too. You think we're so perfect? Just totally dodging the question so he didn't have to, give a clear-cut answer. Isn't that always convenient? So Steve Kerr, who always has a strong opinion about modern politics in the United States, and is often quoted by left-wing websites and pages as being this thoughtful guy, Steve Kerr. And I like Steve Kerr, again. I think he's a good basketball coach. I enjoy his commentary on the NBA. But after his clear cowardice on the whole China issue and standing up for Daryl Morey, the general manager of the Houston Rockets, just not going to stand up for him. What up, Stuart? I mean, it's just cowardice. Why would I want to listen to this guy ever again? But I think I did actually talk about Steve Kerr last time I was on. But last night, LeBron James finally said something about the whole China thing. And for those who may be out of the loop, essentially, what happened was Houston Rockets general manager Daryl Morey last weekend, not this previous weekend, but the weekend before, he tweeted something in support of the Hong Kong protesters, and he got heavily scrutinized by it. The Chinese Basketball Association and the Communist Party were not too pleased. And this comes after the NBA has been trying really hard to get into that market for years. And it happened right before they had exhibition games in China. And as a result, also adding to this interest is the fact that the Houston Rockets are actually really big in China because of Yao Ming. He played for the Houston Rockets. And after that tweet, they essentially erased. China took down all of the merchandise related to the Houston Rockets. Took them all down. There's videos of them painting, they had like Houston Rockets logos on a wall at some practice facility in China or something. And they had videos of of workers just painting over the Houston Rockets, just erasing them. Like, yep, we're not doing business with this team ever again.
What next?
What is the logical course?
So anyway, LeBron James finally said something about it, and instead of standing up for Daryl Morey, you know, LeBron James, he stood up for Steph Curry, and I think rightfully so. A couple years ago when Trump was, tweeting about Steph Curry, how he's revoking the invite to the White House for the championship team, the Warriors. LeBron James stood up for Steph Curry. And LeBron James is also notable for standing up for Colin Kaepernick. I think him and Kevin Durant were, they wore Colin Kaepernick shirts at, I forget when exactly they did it, but it was at some point during last season. They both stand with Colin Kaepernick.
I am ready.
Also, is everyone forgetting that Colin Kaepernick, right, around the same time when it was his last season in the NFL, when the whole kneeling for the national anthem controversy was still going, like soon after that, he wore a Fidel Castro shirt to a press conference and was heavily scrutinized for that. And then, like, right after that, he had to play a game in Miami against the Dolphins. And for those who don't know, Miami has a huge Cuban population. A lot of people who are descendants or who may have been alive, may have been in Cuba when the communist revolution happened, and they're not too fond of Fidel Castro, to say the least. So they showered Colin Kaepernick with booze.
Now, let us hunt him.
And LeBron James decided to stand by Colin Kaepernick. But LeBron James, what he said about Daryl Morey, he's like, yeah, he said he doesn't think Daryl Morey is educated on the situation in China and in Hong Kong. And also went on to say that free speech, it's nice, but it can be, I don't know if he said dangerous, risky, but yeah, if you have free speech, sometimes you might say some dumb stuff that has consequences. So that's how LeBron James stands up for Daryl Morey. After he was lambasted by the communist Chinese government, who's also responsible for a variety of atrocities. I don't think I need to go into to the details too much there. But yeah, it's amazing. LeBron James is all of a sudden silent.
I am ready.
When it comes to criticizing China. And we can talk about why. We can, talk about, it's because, he has millions of dollars on the line in deals with China, and he probably does. But I think it's all besides the point, because I just think it shows what happens when you don't have when you can't critically think about these things, when you do not have a consistent view, a consistent way of looking at things like this.
I will not be thy
What is
prey.
the logical course of action?
Someone pointed this out on Twitter.
What next?
It's amazing going back to Colin Kaepernick.
Bring it on.
How he had that Nike ad campaign where he said, believe in something even if it means sacrificing everything. That attitude has gone right out the window.
The show is over.
And I think this is just another reason why I don't really take celebrities too seriously when they when they chime in about politics, because a lot of times I think it's just virtue signaling, and a lot of times it's nothing that controversial that costs them much. And when rubber meets the road, when millions of dollars are on the line, then suddenly, they don't really know what to say about it. Isn't that convenient? And this is true of Greg Popovich, another guy who doesn't who often chimes in on political and cultural issues in the United States. Also, doesn't really have much to say. Isn't really standing up for Daryl Morey. But back to the LeBron James thing. I mean, he said Daryl Morey was uneducated on the topic, or not educated on the topic. When, I mean, that kind of sounds like deflection, does it not? Because it sounds like LeBron is the one that's not really educated to have really a strong opinion on it.
What you got?
I am ready.
I guess that's what I was trying to say earlier when I said this is what happens when we don't have like a real consistent view of the world and a good way of looking at these things through a consistent lens. Then essentially anything goes. It's just like it's kind of what
Hunt's beginning.
what's his name, the owner of the Brooklyn Nets, when he chimed in on it the night it was happening. He says, well, we don't know the history. It all started with the Opium Wars between Britain and China, and it all stems from there. And, you know, the Chinese think that they've been screwed over and that they should, and all this stuff. And it's just like, he doesn't really have a consistent way of dealing with deciding who's in the right. Because someone has to be in the right on this Hong Kong China protest. But maybe this is how they all think about it. Like, oh, well, who are we to know? You know, China thinks they're in the right. Hong Kong thinks in the right. How do we know? How can we decide who's in the right without having a good education and understanding of what's going on?
Bring it on.
And another wrinkle I find interesting to this is the fact that a lot of these people on the so-called right, a lot of these people who claim to be all for freedom and American values, I think Laura Ingraham tweeted something like this. I think Mike Cernovich also said something like, they don't really care about Hong Kong. Like, who cares? Now they'll definitely take the opportunity to note the hypocrisy of people like LeBron James and Steve Kerr, which is fine. But like, oh, Hong Kong, who cares? So that's the attitude I see amongst a lot of right wingers. Like, who cares? It's just Hong Kong. And I think this whole Hong Kong China dispute, for lack of better terms, I think this is going to be a huge turning point in history. And I know maybe it's inevitable anyway, because the deal is that China gets to, I think, take over in 2040. Like, it's the end of the one country, two systems agreement or whatever. So maybe it's just inevitable anyway, and Hong Kong is just, you know, the protesters are just trying to fight for the last 20 years or so. But hey, 20 years is a long time. And maybe that time, I would say, maybe that time is probably enough to maybe stave off China. Maybe China within the next 20 years will have internal conflict to the point where they need to change the Communist Party, or the Communist Party needs to step down. I mean, who would have thought in the mid to late 70s that the Soviet Union would have collapsed when they did, or that East Germany, that the Berlin Wall would have fallen within 15 or 20 years. But I mean, in 100 years, what do you think's going to be more? What do you think's going to be the bigger story? This Hong Kong dispute, these protests, or something that Trump tweeted?
An interesting dilemma.
What's going to be a bigger story, the Hong Kong protests, or kneeling for the national anthem? All that drama.
Hot endless.
Or Hillary's emails. But anyway, back to Hong Kong and China. I mean, Hong Kong is clearly Hong Kong is freer, both economically and whatnot. I know they don't really have a great democracy system, a great way of how they choose their leaders. But yeah, what country would you rather live in? Hong Kong or China? I know they're technically the same country, but would you rather live under communist China or Hong Kong? Semi-capitalist Hong Kong.
Bring it on. Now, what next?
Yeah, and all these right-wingers, I hear them, you know, they constantly have opinions over, you know, what's going on in Europe. They'll talk, they talked a lot about the French protests
Coming. If
over the summer. The Paris protests.
I am ready.
They talk a lot about, you know, Christians that are persecuted in the Middle East and Africa. Talk about that for days. But Hong Kong protests in probably, you know, one of the most Western countries in Asia. Western philosophically speaking. One of the most free and capitalist countries in Asia. Who cares? I don't really have that strong of an opinion on it. These are the people that allegedly care so much about things like capitalism and freedom and the Constitution and Western values. But yeah, a communist country like China taking over one of the most capitalist countries in the world. Who cares? I don't really care that much about it. Really shows you where the so-called right wing is at and how much they really care about freedom and Western values. Did any of the yellow vests get shot? I actually don't know. I don't think they did. Were there any deaths in those Paris protests? Yeah, China has let in more corporations and capitalists ever since the 90s, and that's why their economy has prospered to the extent that it has. Is because the Communist Party is slowly moved away from communism by opening the doors so that they could get some economic growth, because they tried communism, they tried Marxism to the hardest they could for decades, and it just kept resulting in death and poverty and destruction over and over and over again.
I've done my research on you.
And that seems to be the policy of the Communist Party in China. It's just not so much Marxism, but more pragmatism. How much do we want state control over the means of production? How much freedom do we want to allow so that we can get some economic growth, so that we can maintain our power, whatever power they still have?
What is the logical course of action?
You know, it's not much different than these NBA players and coaches who don't really have much of an opinion on the Chinese Communist Party. They're very pragmatic. Like, oh, I'll speak about politics when it's Donald Trump. By the way, I'm no fan of Donald Trump. I should make that clear, because I don't know if Scuffrod. I've never seen him before, so I just want to make that clear. But yeah, they'll happily chime in on politics when it's someone like Trump. But when China tries to silence an NBA general manager, well, we don't really know. He didn't really sound educated on the matter. You know, we got to look at it from China's perspective too. They feel like they've been wronged all these years.
I am ready.
You know, they're very pragmatic in which and when they want to stand up for their fellow. Because again, LeBron and Steve Kerr and everyone was standing up for Steph Curry when Trump was tweeting about Steph Curry, and I think they were right to do that, to be honest.
Bring it on.
And you know, they'll stand up for Colin Kaepernick, but Daryl Morey gets blowback from the Chinese government for tweeting about Hong Kong protests. Then they're very pragmatic. Then it's like, well, do we really want to anger the Chinese? We have millions of dollars at stake. Very pragmatic, just like the communist regime in China. Very pragmatic with how they want to seize and control the means of production.
All right.
I've been here on the rare occasion and found you on YouTube once, something about Tim Pool, which I don't care for that much for the last 4 months. LeBron tipped his hand when he mentioned people being hurt financially. Yeah.
Coming, if thou darest.
I'm sure the NBA has already been hurt financially. Like I said, Houston Rockets merchandise was pulled off of shelves in China. Off of shelves in China.
Letting the hunt.
I think I have a lazy mouth. Sometimes I say words, but I just don't complete the whole word, and I sound like an idiot.